All right, Rod, thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Once again, my name is Rod Stinson, Vice President at Rainey Planning and Management, and we will be preparing the CEQA document, Environmental Impact Report for the Farmstead Subdivision project. So real quick, here's an overview of what we'll be going over today. I'll give an overview of the CEQA process and where we are in that process. Give the purpose of a scoping meeting and why we're here having this meeting today. Then give a brief overview of the project, and then finally launch into what the anticipated scope of the EIR is at this point. And then we'll open it up for comments. So this next slide here shows a flowchart visual representation of the overall CEQA process. As you can see, it starts with the lead agency in the city, in this case, deciding to prepare an EIR for the project, deciding that CEQA is in fact triggered and that the appropriate document is an EIR. And the next step then is to prepare a notice of preparation, which we have done. It was released earlier this month. And this really kind of kicks off the EIR process. This visualization here is really handy to show the different areas that the public will have the ability to contribute to the process for the CEQA document, and also for discussions on the merits of the project. So really right now at this early stage, the 30-day public review period has started for the notice of preparation. And during that time, we're having the scoping meeting, that's today. And the purpose of the meeting there is to identify what the scope of the EIR will be. After this meeting, or after the 30-day comment period, the draft EIR will be prepared, and that will be released for a 45-day public review period. And at that point, the public will have the opportunity to comment on the adequacy of the EIR. And we're anticipating that that will be early next year, that the document will be released for public review. At the close of that comment period, the 45-day, a final EIR will be prepared and all comments will be responded to. And then at that point, the project will go to approval hearings, anticipated to be mid-summer next year. And at that point, the public will have the ability to comment on the project itself, not only the environmental review, but that would be the opportunity to discuss the merits of the project. So that's where we are. We're at the beginning of the process here. And so really the purpose is to provide an opportunity to the public to provide comments on the environmental issues that should be covered in the EIR, determining the scope of that, of the analysis within the EIR, within those environmental issue topics. The intent of the meeting, though, is not necessarily to get into a question and answer session. It's not really a workshop on the project. It's more to just receive comments on environmental issues that the EIR should cover, and not really get into the merits of the project at this point. So launching into an overview of the project. Obviously, the project's located in Winters. Next slide here we go. Giving a sense of where the project is, it is approximately 62 acres west of 505, north of Grant Avenue, State Route 128. It's east of the existing subdivision here. And the site is generally flat and has been primarily farmed for many decades. The proposed project itself includes subdivision of the site, the development of 200 single-family residential units, and a rezone of a portion of the site for multifamily, and it will have a future development potential of up to 84 multifamily residential units. The development would also include 135,000 square feet of commercial uses across 7 lots totaling 12.4 gross acres. There will be open space and drainage canal totaling 3.2 acres. There will be parkland totaling 5.4 gross acres, and then associated utility improvements and roadway improvements. And the next slide here will give the tentative subdivision map. I can kind of give a visual representation of what that last slide was describing in numbers. So the single family, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but the single family toward the north, park space, commercial, and then the multifamily here in the corner. And access from Grant Avenue here at Main Street, and then another driveway here. The proposed project entitlements, in order to allow for the project, would require a general plan amendment, rezone, tentative subdivision map approval, affordable housing agreement, and a development agreement. Additional approvals include a parcel map, design review, and a conditional use permit for the restaurant and drive-through uses. And so now, given that as being the proposed project, the environmental impact report is anticipated to include multiple EIR chapters that will address a multitude of subjects required under CEQA. And I'll just go through those now briefly. And these are the topics that we anticipate to include. And at the close of this, when we open it up to public comment to make your comments on the topics that we should be covering, these are what we're anticipating to include. So we will address aesthetics, visual resources, impacts to visual resources along the public viewpoints. There will be visual representations prepared and presented in that chapter. The agricultural resources chapter will address potential impacts to ag resources, including prime, unique, and farmland of statewide importance. The air quality and greenhouse gas emissions chapter will address both construction and operational air quality and greenhouse gas emissions. It will address not only criteria, air pollutants, and greenhouse gases, which will be modeled. It will also include a health risk assessment associated with construction emissions from construction equipment and dust, et cetera. In addition, that chapter will also address energy. The biological resources chapter will address impacts to plant and wildlife communities, threatened and endangered and special status species, as well as potential impacts to wetlands on site. The cultural resources chapter will also be combined with the tribal cultural resources topics in one chapter, and it will address the potential for the proposed project to impact any historical, archaeological, tribal, and or paleontological resources that may occur on the site. The land use planning, population and housing chapter will address consistency with the city's adopted plans, and would whether the proposed project would directly or indirectly induce a substantial unplanned population growth. There will also be a noise chapter. The noise chapter will address potential noise impacts on the surrounding sensitive receptors, and it will include quantification of construction and operational noise, primarily traffic noise, from the proposed project, as well as some of the on-site commercial and recreation uses on the site on the future residents. And the Public Services and Utilities chapter will address the potential new demand for services, including fire, police, schools, parks, recreation, water supply, wastewater, conveyance and treatment, and solid waste. Any potential impacts from the project related to those topics will be addressed. In addition, there'll be, if there's an identification for any new or physically altered facilities associated with the proposed project, increased demand, we would address those potential impacts as well. Under traffic, as of the last year, CEQA's primary focus on for traffic analyses has been on vehicle miles traveled, VMT, rather than a focus on level of service, LOS, as was typical with previous CEQA analyses. So the primary focus of the transportation chapter will be on VMT. However, there will still be an evaluation of LOS to determine consistency with LOS standards, more of a general plan consistency type discussion. And then finally, the EIR will include a reasonable range of alternatives to the proposed project, with the primary intent to reduce any significant impacts that may or may not have been identified through the analysis process. So that is what we intend to cover in the EIR. We are currently in the middle of the public comment period, and we are accepting in this meeting any verbal comments. And while the meeting is being recorded and we will produce a summary of the comments, I would also suggest that anyone making comments today still feel free to submit a written comment to Kirk at the email listed here. The phone number also is listed if you would like to discuss anything with about the project with him. But the comment period does close December 7th, so be sure to get your written comments in by that time. And then finally, just a reminder that we're not intending this to engage in a question and answer session. And it's not really a time to discuss the merits of the project, but more to focus on what the EIR should cover in the analysis. So with that, that finishes my presentation. Kirk, I don't know if you have anything to add before we open it up, but should probably give a little bit of direction on how we intend to manage the comments and who has any comments, raising the hand feature and that kind of thing.
Yes, it's a very good point. I do not have anything to add in regards to the meeting overview and format. Just like to reiterate Rod's comment that the focus of today's scoping meeting is what should be included or considered as it relates to the environmental analysis of the proposed project. As Rod mentioned, I think it would be best for anyone who would like to provide comment or even questions for that matter to go ahead and raise their hand, and I can kind of go about and ask people to unmute themselves, and we can go kind of in that manner. So if anyone would like to provide comment relating to the NOP scoping meeting and the environmental review, please raise your hand at this time, and I can begin calling on people. All right, it looks like Kate has raised her hand, so I'm going to ask to unmute. Kate, when you're ready, go ahead.
Great. Thanks for this, Kurt, and thanks to Rod for the presentation. I really appreciate it. And I had a couple things that I'd be interested in seeing in the EIR. And let's see, these are just thumbnail ideas, basically. And I'm happy to go into it more later, but I don't want to blab forever. And one is related to traffic and greenhouse gas production or emissions. And and consideration of different types of intersections. So I know there's one roundabout, certainly using roundabouts, that's actually a really great way to decrease the greenhouse gas emissions. And so I'd be interested in seeing a consideration of just what the different ideas are for the different intersections within the project, as well as where it connects with existing infrastructure. And on a similar note, just making sure, since there's been a lot of discussion about increasing walkability, and so I want to, within the EIR context, kind of consider what options there are to increase walkability within the project and connecting with the rest of the city. There's certainly ongoing discussion about trying to get pedestrians across Grant Avenue. and so if people are able to walk, that's another way to or use non-vehicle transportation. That's a way to decrease emissions, hopefully. Something that I don't know if this would be in energy considerations or if it'd be probably in the health risk assessment, even though it's not specifically with the construction, but when an area is urbanized, the temperature increases. And since we're hot here in the summer and getting hotter, I'd be really, really excited to see the different options for how this project can minimize the heat island impact. And so whether that's through the tree cover, minimizing the dark surfaces, or minimizing just the fully paved, I think that would be a really great thing to bring in and actually increase public health considerations. And something that that certainly comes up in a lot of meetings the last couple of years is considerations of infiltration and stormwater conveyance. And so that's something that I think would be really great to address in pretty good detail in the EIR, both how it's going to happen for this project, what the impacts would be on existing areas, and then since it connects, I believe, to the ditch, I can't remember what we're calling it, but that goes near the PG&E facility. And then I think there's the concrete apron down to the creek. I want to make sure that we don't end up with, say, really big increased peak discharges going into the creek that could do erosion there. And I don't want to increase the stormwater related pollutants that get into the creek, and I certainly don't want to flood anybody's houses. And since this is an area that's already subject to flooding, I think we need to consider what the opportunities are for infiltration in an area where the soil may be saturated.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you for your comments. Those are great.
Thanks.
Thank you, Kate. Oh, Kate, do you have one more? Let's see here. I'll go ahead and ask you to, oh, no. All right. Let's see here. Does anyone else have any comments, questions, directions relating to the environmental analysis of the project? That can include project alternatives. So as part of the EIR scope, it will include alternatives to the project proposal. So if anyone has any comments related to that, that's something we're also soliciting at this time. So let's see here. Okay, it looks like we have a hand raised. I'm going to go ahead and ask Ozzy to unmute and to go ahead.
How's it going, everyone? Nice to meet you on Zoom, Kirk. Welcome to the city. Just wanted to echo Kate's points around network connectivity, particularly walkability and bikeability. And if the project is deemed to need to mitigate traffic impacts as a result of high VMT, there should be consideration not only to create facilities within the project site, but also considerations to mitigate those high VMTs through connections through existing networks, as Kate noted, But I would also just like to add that the idea to also mitigate potential impacts through the development and creation of new facilities outside of the project site is also a way that we can approach reduction of VMT. And just more specifically, I'm thinking about the connection potentially to the vacant parcel next to the PG&E site, and how we can potentially create a new trail, a bike and walking trail from the project site across Grant to that vacant site to the south next to PG&E. And there's already folks that live in the area know that there's already a path created in that vacant land that could be used to connect to the existing Pewter Creek Trail. So just as a way to again enhance the network. Those were my comments. Thank you so much.
Very good comments. Thank you, Ozzy. Let's see here. Anyone else like to provide comment, direction, any questions related to the EIR process?
All right, now this is a very silent group, so I'm going to encourage people to speak up as your friendly neighborhood city manager. So please, if you have comments or if you have questions about the process, please, please raise your hand. Thank you, Kate.
I'd be happy for somebody else to take a turn before I start talking again. So if
No one else has raised their hand, so please,
all
Kate,
right.
take it away.
All right. So since one of the topics that we do talk about a fair amount and increasingly is wildfire. And so I think as we design new neighborhoods and new projects, it's good to consider what the wildfire impacts would be, both in terms of protecting inhabitants from smoke, since the air does tend to be smokier. I don't know if that ties in with EIR or if that's more when we get to a design situation, but I think at an EIR level, it would be good to consider how the transportation plan for this project within itself and how it ties into everything else, how that works in terms of evacuation scenarios, and trying to move, if we have to move a lot of people quickly, how do we do that? And does this tie in with a larger master plan for that? And if not, what can we do to improve that? And but then also, as we look at other communities who've dealt with wildfire, what are the opportunities to make it so that that a neighborhood essentially doesn't become a conduit for wildfire coming through the neighborhood or through the rest of the community? And so just kind of considerations of some of the fire-wise design options that are out there. And so whether it's in choosing the type of vegetation that's included, and or say not having the wooden fences that come right up to the houses, but instead using wrought iron or something for the last 5 feet. And so I think if that's included on early in a project, then we can kind of get a better sense of it as it goes along.
Yes, those are some very good comments, Kate. As it pertains to kind of wildfire response, emergency services, disaster planning, those kind of things, it does occur throughout the entire process. So there are some more larger picture items that would occur relating to what we're looking at right now. So the tentative subdivision map, how they're proposing to lay out the subdivision, the residential lots, the commercial lots, that will tie into it. And then later down the road, when lots are proposed to be developed, those design, including the building materials, the configurations, that will also get reviewed at a later portion. So a lot of high level overlapping things as it pertains to a few of those comments you made. So thank you for those. And it looks like we have Nathan. I'm going to ask Nathan to unmute and go ahead, Nate.
Hi, some of this might not be the right time for it, might be in a later meeting, but some of the things that have come to my mind already are what impact is this going to do to our water system in the city? I know we're running off a couple of wells. If we add 200 more homes and say minimum 400 more people, how much more of an impact is that going to make on our water system? Also, it's how is it going to, it's going to affect the people that already live in the existing community next to it, such as myself. I live on Broadview and I purchased on Broadview because it was basically a dead end street, and it has been since the development was created in the 90s. And the proposed plans are making it one of the main thoroughfares into the new proposed division. With that will come a lot of noise, a lot of dust, just a whole lot of extras that'll affect the environment around the people that already live in here. Yeah, I'm not sure quite. I'm already getting frustrated with this. I'm just gonna kind of pause there, but yeah, how is this gonna affect even the police force and schools and all that stuff too? There's a lot more environment than just the physical environment. There's the infrastructure around it that has to be considered as well.
Thank you, Nathan. Yeah, those are some good comments. It looks like Rod may want to jump in following my comments, but just to kind of reassure you and those listening, the EIR process, not just for this project, but for generally all projects, does provide that type of analysis where we look at utility supply, so water and sewer. We look at emergency response times, so fire, police services. All of those even impacts the school and land use. And so existing development, anticipated future development, all of that is kind of included in an environmental analysis for projects. And I'm not sure if you participated in the workshop relating to this project back in July 13th, but we heard a lot of similar comments to those that you raised. And it looks like you raised your hand again, so I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute. And if you have any follow-ups, go ahead, Nathan.
It was an accidental raise hand, but yeah, no, I honestly, I didn't even find out about this project up until a couple weeks ago, and here I am now because now I know about it, so I'm getting involved.
Excellent. Yes, tell anyone and everyone you can. We try to post these types of meetings on the city website along with the newspaper. So yeah, and as Rod identified early in the meeting, you feel free to contact city staff if you have any questions, wondering where the project is status wise, so things like that. I have two raised hands. I'm going to first go to the user that is titled iPhone. I'm going to ask iPhone to unmute. I'm sorry, I don't have your name on here, so you're going to have to unmute on your end. All right, we might be having some technical difficulties. Okay, while you figure that out, I'm going to go to Catherine. Catherine, I'm asking you to unmute. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I was just curious, I don't know if this is the right forum for it, but also just the impact on parking in the downtown area with increased number of people living in town. Probably some of the walkability part would go into that if people were able to walk or ride their bikes across the highway. But just curious, because I know parking can be limited, especially on the weekends. So just, impact there. If there's ever been any thought towards a parking garage in the downtown area?
Parking is currently being considered for the downtown area outside of this project. It is a big issue. And it's definitely something on the city's work plate as it pertains to this project. I do not believe a downtown parking analysis will be included as part of this. But the comments related to walkability and pedestrian connectivity all play into that. So those components of the project can kind of help in the long run.
Right, right. Okay, thank you.
Rod, it looked like you were going to chime in a little bit earlier. I didn't know if you wanted to follow up and add anything or.
I was just, I was going to reassure Nathan, I don't know if he's still on, but, oh, there he is, yeah, I see him, that, you know, it now is the right time for those types of comments to ensure that we make sure we cover the areas that he cares about in that neighborhood, and was just going to reassure him that with that neighborhood that he is in, it's one of the closest areas with sensitive receptors, and will be one of the areas that is of primary focus of the EIR. So just wanted to say that.
Thank you. We have another comment. Katie.
Yeah, hi. Okay, so as a rebuttal, because obviously my husband is the one that asked questions about that. With that being said, so it is going to open up a lot of traffic. Is there any alternatives that you guys have set into place, just in case the people obviously of this community that is currently already here, have issues with? Just simply because, again, if you are taking, and this is just, my take on the matter, this is going to be a huge thing that you guys are doing. And obviously there's going to be a lot of people packed into that acreage, and using this as, a way to get from off the freeway to that first roundabout and then all the way through here. I'm just not seeing the point to looping basically everything in. And then having it go all the way through the new division, including ours. If they have a park over there and, we've got a tiny one over here, it's going to open up a lot of opportunity for a lot more traffic and a lot more, and which is good. But if you've got kids and like my husband said, we did buy on this street, because it was a dead end, and it's going to open up a whole new wormhole, if you will.
Yes, to kind of briefly go into it, have we considered any alternatives? No, we're at the very initial steps of the process. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, part of EIR and the CEQA process for any project that goes through the EIR process, alternatives to the project proposal are included to help decision makers kind of weigh the pros and cons of a proposed project against potential alternatives.
Yeah, and I would just add that a traffic study is being prepared, and as part of that process, they identify distribution of the trips, and to the extent that any impacts are identified, mitigation measures would be applied. And if there's any significant impacts, we would then establish alternatives to try to reduce any significant impacts that have been identified through the process. So the concern will be addressed in the EIR.
All right. I see. Let's see here. iPhone, I'm going to ask to unmute. So you're going to have to unmute on your end. Let's try this one more time.
Do you want to try putting something in the chat and we can read it out loud? If you know how to do that. And while he's working on that, can I offer a suggestion, please? We would like to create a distribution list for people who want to stay abreast of any updates related to this project. And so I'm going to offer up Kirk now that he is with us. If you email Kirk your contact information, he will create a master distribution list for all things related to the Farmstead project. And he will also prepare a separate one related to Walnut 10, which is adjacent to the Farmstead project on the northwest corner. And if you are interested in both those projects, please indicate in your email and he can create two separate lists for, and maybe they end up turning out to be one related to Walnut 10 and Farmstead. And that'll supplement our efforts that we've been using right now, promoting information in the Winners Express and in the Friday update. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Kathleen, for those comments. I will put my email in the chat. Rod did include it in one of the earlier slides, but I can include my email for anyone attending the meeting currently. Let's see here. All right, Kate, I'm gonna ask to unmute and go ahead.
Thanks. Another question, and this is about light. And so I'd be interested in the EIR covering what the options are for lighting, and I mean that which ties into energy use certainly, but then also just into light pollution and how that could impact. You know, it seems to particularly impact insects and birds, but also increase. You know, changes just a sense of things, whether or not you can see the night sky, and for some people how well they sleep. And so I think that would be a good thing to include in the EIR.
Excellent.
And one thing, and I don't know if this is EIR or if this is more down the road, but it would tie into the greenhouse gas emissions, and that's the type of you know, like the type of stove and the type of hot water heater that go in, whether it's electrification or if that's use of gas. So I don't know if that's appropriate for this step or if that's later on, since it might tie in with infrastructure. I figured I'd mention it now.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kate. All right, let's see here. Anyone else?
I'm not seeing anyone.
Yeah, we've had some good input so far. Just hoping we were on a roll.
Yeah, I would just mention to the iPhone gentleman that can't seem to unmute that you still have opportunity to submit written comments, and just a general comment as well to everyone else that the comment period is still open, closes on the 17th. So this isn't by any means your last opportunity to make comments. You can follow up with an email or letter, written comments back to the city.
Yes, thank you, Rod. And that kind of goes into Nathan's earlier comments. Understood that that some of you attending here today may have just heard about this project. The project is kind of in the earlier phases or stages, and there is still a significant amount of public participation that will occur as this project goes through the entitlement process. So for anyone who wants to continue to participate, there will be plenty more opportunities. All right, so Rod, it is looking like we are running out of questions and comments. I am not seeing anyone else.
All right, well, I will strongly encourage people to submit written comments to Kirk and to send an email if you're interested in being included in on updates related to the Farmstead project or Walnut 10.
Yes, and to reiterate, I put my email address in the chat. So if you would like to be included on a distribution list, please email me. Identify if you're interested in updates related to Farmstead or Walnut 10 or both. Or if you just have any other questions or comments, feel free to contact me. So, all right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and conclude the meeting. It looks like we do not have any other individuals raising their hands for questions or comments. I would like to thank everyone for those comments submitted and participating in today's meeting. And we look forward to hearing from you and from participation coming up here in the future as this moves along. So everyone, you have a nice day and thank you for everything.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.